it's a matter of documentation. You can get old newspapers and say it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese formed a 500,000 man army, 500,000, and they were going to hit the 2nd Infantry Division and 2 Rock Divisions. The Rock Divisions then had no training.
Mm-hmm.
They'd bug out. They bugged out and left the 2nd Infantry Division facing them. And that thing, and I never was so scared in my life. My job was to stay down by the artillery, and if they came over the mountain, broke through the infantry, I was to put explosives in the barrel of the artillery and destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get it. And they held the line up there, and of course they had air power, and they had, must have been Big Mo sitting off the coast. It was dropping 16-inch shells.
Uh-huh.
And the infantry, but I went on for about 4 or 5 days and nights. And I tell you, I thought I was going to die. I said, I kept thinking, I don't want to die before I'm 18 years old, you know. And so it ended, and the Air Force turned in 375,000 dead Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And they said preposterous. Well, if you knew that the people, the intelligence had known what the infantry guys, what we knew on the front line, is that they put 7 men with 1 weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And when that 7th one picked up that weapon, he retreated.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't leave the weapons. Well, they told us that go out and head count. And it was down a long hill like these hills here,
Mm-hmm.
and not quite as steep. It was a bad place to try to come up a hill
Mm-hmm.
for them to do that. And we went down there and we counted 125,000. And I just thought they were stacked up from the front line to the bottom of the mountain. I walked from the top of that hill to the bottom of the mountain, never stepped on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Walked just stepping on dead bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Had to take a few long steps sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But we went out and counted 125,000 when we got together, and we said, we went back and told them to kiss their butt. We wouldn't count anymore. Do what they want to do. If they want to count them, you out there and count them yourself. You get by about anything in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not like the old West.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a matter of documentation. You can dig up in the archives and newspapers
Mm-hmm.
of that of any town, and you'll find an article in there about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a bad battle.
And
Massacre Valley in January was a bad battle. And then that other place I was trying to think of, Chip Yong Knee in January and February had 2 awful battles.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one in May. And then Heartbreak Ridge was 23rd Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division.
And these all took place north of the parallel, correct?
It could have.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I know is when we went across the river, we crossed the 38th parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And they, but it was cold, bitter cold.
Mm-hmm.
And during that one battle, because I'd been out, I'd be out 3 or 4 days at a time trying to find a company after I'd performed my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I had nothing but a blanket, and I lost my voice
Mm-hmm.
completely, absolutely, totally. Not one sound could I make.
Uh-huh.
No grunt, nothing. And so they wouldn't let me take me off the front line. They had to have me. I was their demolition man.
Uh-huh.
And so I got off the truck. I took diarrhea, and I got off the truck one night.
Uh-huh.
They was moving, and all the guys had fell asleep in the back of the truck. I didn't have a weapon, didn't have anything, and I couldn't holler. And I was left there, I was standing in the middle, and it was so black dark that you could absolutely, I put my hand against my nose and couldn't see anything.
Uh-huh.
So I said, well, I know which way's south.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked from one ditch line to the next ditch line, and I walked about half the night, and I come up on a camp fire where 2 MPs were at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are you going to do? You're not going to throw a rock in to get their attention.
Uh-huh.
You get blown. So I just put my hands over my head like this,
Mm-hmm.
and I stood there, and they saw me, and they leveled their guns at me, it halted, who's there, and I was pointing. They thought I'd been shot in the mouth or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so they let me come up to them, and I was making signs. I couldn't make a sound.
Hmm.
But that was a scary night.
Uh-huh.
It was. But Heartbreak Ridge was the worst thing. The 23rd Infantry Regiment
Mm-hmm.
fought that, and we had a company of Turks,
Mm-hmm.
a company of French, a company of Dutch, and a company of Ethiopians.
Mm-hmm.
And funniest thing about it, didn't make any difference at night. What anybody said, those Ethiopians built a big fire and danced around it.
Uh-huh.
If they didn't care.
Uh-huh.
But those Dutch were always wanting to take out booby traps for me. If I had to go take them out, they come wanting to take them booby traps out.
Uh-huh.
And I said, you can't do it. You're going to get blown up. They're tough. They're Dutch tough fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Very tough. And of course, them Turks, you know what they are. They're mean.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Heartbreak Ridge was. I was there in October and September, and they called me back up there. Our regiment was on there. We were attached to them, and they called me back that second time. That's when that happened to that guy. He got his
Mm-hmm.
arm blown. They had a big old, we called a long tom gun set across the mountain. It had a barrel on it. Must have been 100 foot long.
Mm-hmm.
I know what kind of a gun it was, but it could hurl a shell. And you couldn't bust them Chinese. Only way you could bust the Chinese bunker was to drop a 16-inch shell or a bomb directly on it.
Mm-hmm.
They used napalm then. The
Mm-hmm.
big tanks come floating out of the sky, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd see them floating right like you'd come right down on it. And I tell you, I was terrified of that and white phosphorus now.
Mm-hmm.
That white phosphorus is a mean thing. And napalm would run down the hollers right beside of you. You didn't get in the gully. You stayed on the ridge. You learned.
Did the Allied forces or did the South Korea forces and the North Korean did they both use napalm?
No, only the United States.
I see. Okay.
They had no air force. Their air force was fighting the jets up in Mig Alley.
Uh-huh.
That was Russian pilots in those planes.
I see.
And the Chinese didn't have anyone that could fly, and so they had a lot of action. I saw one MiG. He came across Heartbreak Ridge. He's looking for that big gun right overhead. That's the only MiG plane I ever seen there.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one other thing that was it was funny in a way, and it wasn't funny. We were wanting to cross that river to 38th parallel, and a engineer company with boats came up there. We were combat engineers, and they came up there, and we got caught in a roadblock, in an ambush. This was maybe July or something like that, and this driver freaked out, refused. I don't know where you want this in the interview or not, but I'll give it to you if you want it.
Okay.
This driver, this lieutenant was standing there with his hand on his gun. He said, "I'm going to kill you if you don't move that truck." And I thought, the crazy lieutenant, he's done cracked up. He's talking to himself. Well, this kid freaked out. He crawled up under that truck between the exhaust and the frame, and it was burning him, blistered him. And I said to him, which I wasn't going to let that lieutenant shoot him, whatever. It might have cost that lieutenant, but I wasn't going to let him shoot that kid. And I said, "Lieutenant, now I don't think any of us are going to get out of this one." I said, "You can court-martial him, you go to the back." Now I said, "I want you to just put your gun away." And he did. And I don't know. So I said, "We got to get to the truck." I said, "Well, I'll take it through." I got in that truck, and it was in zigzag curves.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't make the curve. I'd ram it into the hill and throw it in reverse and back it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got little flecks. I didn't get any Purple Heart because I didn't want one. I got little. But right before I started, I took that 30 caliber machine gun off the top of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I just weighed 130 pounds. And I was going to spray that first hollow because I knew that's where they were at mostly. And I couldn't hold that machine gun, couldn't turn loose from it. And I shot about half the hood off that truck.
Uh-huh.
And I finally got rid of the machine gun, threw it down. Well, I got in the truck, and I was saying, I say he's a Jewish boy because he's, Gazesh was his name.
Uh-huh.
And he was a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he hopped on the running board on the other side. Well, one time when I had raised up, sat down until something scratched me, when I'd raised up to pull that wheel, they put bullet holes through the door where I was sitting.
Mm-hmm.
When I sat back down, they'd done change their position, shoot the ring mount, little flecks of that bullets might have been a minute section. One piece went in my neck, one in my ear, and I didn't even go to first aid for it. But here I was fighting this thing up through there, and we came around the curve. What did we run into? Horse cavalry, horses. They done vacated the horses, took up the mountain. But the Chinese used horse cavalry, and there was horses everywhere. You know, like on Mesh, that colonel had a horse. You know, they had, and so here I'm going through them horses in the road and stuff, and them shooting at us, and because they's hollering, "Don't hit those horses! Don't hit those horses!" I thought it was hilarious. I got tickled at him. I couldn't get afraid, so I pulled. I got the truck up there. They said, "Sarge, what are you gonna do with that truck?" I said, I guess they was sat there. I said, "Gasoline's pouring out of the bullet holes in the tanks and stuff." And he said, "It's going to blow up." I said, "Not on us, it ain't." I put it in gear, cut her over the mountain, sent her down the mountain. Didn't do a bit of good to drive it through. You can do it, like I said, do anything you want to get by with it. But I got many a time we'd laid where I got the Bronze Star with V for Valor. I had 3 or 4 other Bronze Stars. And I'm sure we were laying tanks trying to pull back, and the enemy they were right in sight shooting. They never did hit us, and they had them artillery quad 50s and twin 40s. Every time one of them stick up their head, they cut loose. But they gave me a Bronze Star for valor. I'm not sure the reason I got a Bronze Star. I'm sure that lieutenant got a Silver Star. You know, that's the way it worked. And I didn't care what they had. I didn't even know I had it till I came home. And the only other thing that outside of everyday things, that when that guy sent that paper, that half track into the river there, and I don't know whether you read that or not, but we would put in, not only this, but I was told to put in a bridge across this river. And they said, "We want a 60-foot bridge." And I said, "You're wasting your time." And I argued them for an 80-foot bridge. I said, 80 foot's not going to do it, it's going to wash out. I said, "How you need?" I said, "I need 160 foot. I know these rivers." Well, they made fun of me. They put us 80 foot in, it washed out. They put 120 foot in, and it washed out. And rivers would raise so fast that they'd come with waves that high, like the ocean, out in mountains. Well, this guy came up there with ammunition, a half track and pulled ammunition. He said, "I'm going to cross the river here." I said, "Starting to rain, you better stay out of that river." I said, "You won't get across for it to be over your half track." Well, he didn't pay attention to me, and I was on the other side, and when he got stuck, they run a cable over to him, to there, and hooked it on there. He must have, I don't know how they got it to him. It was a light cable, and they had nothing to pull it with, and so the water came up and washed him out of the cab, and he was a husky guy. He had a wrist on him bigger than my arm there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this guy that was an excellent swimmer named Slater. He was an 8-ball, but he was an excellent swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen him go in them rivers and swim for the fun of it. That river was so bad. I said, Slater, he was my platoon.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Slater, go in there and get that guy. I said, he's going to drown.
Mm-hmm.
So Archie said, no way in hell they might survive that water. I'm not going to do it. I said, I'm not ordering you, Slater. I'm just asking you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I could order him. So I thought, well, I can't see that without looking so bad. I can't. So I ran up on the bridge. I stripped myself naked.
Mm-hmm.
I went down the pier of that bridge and I aimed myself for that half track. And I said, Lord, if I miss it, this is it. I know where they'll ever find me at.
Mm-hmm.
And that water, I just dropped in that water and it slammed me against that, like New River,
Mm-hmm.
Rapids,
Mm-hmm.
and slammed me against that thing, and I got up on top of it. And I said, can you hold on another few seconds? He said, yeah. I said, now here's the deal. I said, I can get you out of here. You do what I tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm going to reach down, I'm going to get your sleeve with your other arm, and I'm going to pull, and you pull that arm. I said, if you reach for me, I'm going to kick you in the face, and you're going to drown.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you understand, there's no use of both of us dying. And he said, okay. So I pulled and tugged on him, got him up on there,
Mm-hmm.
and I was freezing to death.
Mm-hmm.
I was weighed 135 or 40 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
the most. And we got that little cable and walked ourselves back to land.
Mm-hmm.
Now they gave me the soldier's medal for it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a pretty high award.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just about basically it. Outside of just everyday, fighting, crazy things you see, and
Mm-hmm.
people shot and blowing up, and I practically stayed on the front lines because they offered me if I'd stay in, said if you'll stand a little bit, we'll make you master sergeant. I don't want master sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, Lieutenant came and he said, give you a battlefield commission. You can go to OCS and you get out and give you a battlefield commission. I said, I don't want to be no lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, all I want to do is put in my time here, and I want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just basically about it, Jason.
Okay. Well, you actually